I want to tell you something I learned the hard way. I planted for years. Every single day, I showed up. I worked. I tried. And almost nothing grew. Not because I was lazy, not because the seeds were bad, but because I had never once stopped to ask the most important question a man can ask before he begins. What kind of soil am I planting in? Thing here is what nobody tells you about hard work. Hard work in the wrong conditions does not produce a smaller harvest. It produces a no harvest at all, ending, and you can pour your whole life into ground that was never prepared to receive it, and walk away with nothing but caluses and confusion. There is a parable, ancient, simple, yet devastating in its precision. A sower went out to sow, and some seeds fell on the path, and the birds took them. Some fell on rocky ground, and they sprouted fast, but withered just as fast because the roots had nowhere to go. Some fell among thorns, and the thorns choked them out. And only some fell on good soil. And those few seeds produced 30, 60, 100 times what was planted. Now, most people read that story and think it is about seeds. It is not about seeds. It is about EU. It is about the conditions of your life. It is about whether the ground you are standing on, the relationships, the habits, the environment, the thinking, is prepared to receive what you are trying to build. Stay with me, because in the next 30 minutes, I am going to walk you through 7 laws that Sower understood. Laws that govern whether your effort compounds into abundance or simply disappears into ground that was never ready for it. Let me begin with the law that most people violate before they ever plant a single seed. The law of prepared ground. Here is what I know about farmers. Real farmers, not the kind who read about farming, but the kind whose hands are permanently stained with soil. They do not begin with planting. They begin with a preparation. They plow. They break up the hard ground. They remove the rocks. They test the soil. They add what is missing. And only then, after all of that, do they plant. But most people skip all of that. They get an idea on Monday and they want results by Friday. They read a book about success and they expect their life to transform before the week is out. They hear a good philosophy and they want the harvest before they have done a single day of preparation. I was guilty of this myself. Early in my life, I was in a hurry. I wanted the results without the readiness. I wanted the crop without the plow. And what I got consistently was disappointment. Not because I lacked desire, but because I had skipped the season before the season. Here is the truth about preparation. It is invisible work. Nobody sees it. Nobody applauds it. The one standing when you are breaking up the hard ground of your own thinking, when you are removing the rocks of bad habits, when you are clearing the thorns of toxic associations. It looks like nothing is happening, and it looks like you are standing still. But you are not standing still. You are getting ready, and readiness is everything. Ask yourself this question. Before you plant your next goal, your next venture, your next relationship, is the ground prepared? Have you done the inner work? Have you cleared the clutter? Have you broken up the hardness that accumulated years of disappointment and neglect? Because here is what I have observed across a lifetime of watching people try and fail and try again. The ones who skip preparation do not fail slowly. They fail fast. The seed goes in, something sprouts quickly, enthusiastically, and then it dies, just like the rocky ground in the parable. Quick growth, no roots, no staying power. Standing of preparation is not a delay. Preparation is the investment that makes everything else possible. Sow before you plant another seed, before you make another resolution, start another business, enter another relationship. Ask yourself, have I prepared the ground? I done the invisible work that nobody sees, but that makes everything possible? If the answer is no, then the most productive thing you can do right now is not to plant. It is to unprepared. Now let me tell you about the soil itself. Because this is where most people make the second great mistake. They believe that effort is the variable. That if they simply try harder, push longer, sacrifice more, the results will come. And I understand that belief. I held it myself for years. But here is what I eventually learned: effort is not the primary variable. Soil quality is. Think about this carefully. You can take the finest seed in the world, the most carefully selected, the most genetically perfect seed, and plant it in depleted soil. And it will struggle. It will fight for nutrients that are not there. It will reach for moisture that has long since evaporated. And eventually it will fail. Not because the seed was bad, then because the other environment was wrong. Now take that same seed and plant it in rich, prepared, nutrient-dense soil. Without any additional effort, without working harder, without pushing more. That seed will produce abundantly. The environment does the heavy lifting. This is why I have always said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Not because it sounds poetic, because it is biologically accurate in terms of how growth works. The people around you are your soil. Then they are the environment in which your ideas, your ambitions, your character either flourish or wither. If you are surrounded by people who are cynical, who mock ambition, who celebrate mediocrity, that is poor soil. It does not matter how good your seed is. The environment will drain it, slowly, invisibly, without any dramatic moment you can point to. Your ambitions will shrink to match the expectations of the people around you. But if you are surrounded by people who are growing, who are building, who challenge you to think bigger and demand more of yourself, that is rich soil. And in that environment, even your average ideas will grow into something remarkable. So here is the question I want you to sit with. Look at the 5 people you spend the most time with. Not the people you admire from a distance. The people you actually talk to every day. The people whose voices are in your ear. Are they rich soil or depleted soil? Are they adding nutrients to your life? Encouragement, challenge, wisdom, accountability, or are they draining what little is left? Be honest. Your answer to that question tells you more about your future than any plan you have ever written. Now, I want to talk about the seed that fell on the path. The path, not the rocky ground. Not the thorny ground, the path, the place where so many feet have walked for so long that the soil has become as hard as stone. Nothing penetrates it. Nothing takes root. The seed simply sits on the surface, exposed, vulnerable, until something comes along and takes it away. I have met people who are path people. You probably have too, maybe. And I say this with great care and great respect. Maybe you have been one yourself at certain seasons of your life. The path person is not a bad person. They are not a lazy person. They are as hardened person. Life has walked over them so many times. Disappointment after disappointment, promise after broken promise, and effort after unrewarded effort, that the surface of their heart has compacted. It has become impenetrable, not out of malice, out of self-protection. And here is the tragedy. When good seeds land on that hardened ground, a good idea, a genuine opportunity, a word of wisdom at exactly the right moment, they cannot get in. They sit on the surface, and before long they are gone. I have seen this happen with information. Someone hears a life-changing philosophy, and they nod politely, and they forget it by the time they reach their car. Not because the idea was bad, because the ground was too hard to receive it. I have seen it happen with opportunity. A door opens, A real door, a genuine chance, and the hardened person cannot see it, or they see it and immediately list the reasons it will not work. The hardness has become a filter that keeps everything good out. So how do you soften hardened ground? The same way a farmer does, with water, with time, with patient, persistent effort. You introduce moisture. And in human terms, moisture is humility. It is the willingness to say, I do not know everything. I have been wrong before. The ending, this might be the thing I have been waiting for. Humility softens the path. It breaks up the compaction. It creates space for seeds to enter and take root. You want to ask yourself today, in what areas of your life have you become hard? Where have you stopped receiving? Where have you stopped being teachable? Because I promise you this, whatever you have closed yourself off from, whatever you have decided is not possible, whatever you have given up on, that is exactly where your next great harvest is waiting to begin. Comment below and tell me what is one area where you know the ground has gotten hard. I want to know. And I think naming it is the first act of softening it. The rocky ground is the most dangerous of all the soils. And I will tell you why. Because it looks like success at first. When a seed falls on rocky ground, it germinates quickly. The shallow soil warms fast. The sprout emerges with enthusiasm. It looks vigorous. It looks promising. And for a short time, a very short time, it looks like this might be the one. But the rocks are just beneath the surface. And when the roots try to go deep, when they reach for the water and the nutrients that only depth can provide, they hit stone. They have nowhere to go. And when the summer heat comes, when the pressure arrives, when the real test begins, the shallow, rooted plant wilts, and it does not recover. I have watched this pattern play out in human lives more times than I can count. Someone gets excited about a new idea. They start fast. They announce it to everyone. They feel the momentum. And for a few weeks, maybe a few months, looks like something real is happening. But they never went deep. They never built the foundation. They never developed the disciplines, the skills, the relationships, the reserves that would sustain them when difficulty arrived. They were all surface and no root. And difficulty always arrives, always. The summer always comes. Pressure is not an accident of life. It is a feature of life. It is the mechanism by which the deep-rooted are separated from the shallow-rooted. It is how life tests whether what you have built is real. Here is the question I want you to ask about every significant endeavor in your life. How deep are my roots? Not how fast am I growing? Not how good do things look right now? Then how deep are my roots? Depth comes from study, from practice, from failure and the lessons you extract from failure, from the slow, unglamorous work of building competency over time, from showing up when no one is watching and doing the work that will not pay off for months or years. It is easy to go fast. It is easy to look good in the beginning. But the ones who last, the ones who are still standing when the summer heat has burned everything else away, they are the ones who chose depth over speed, root work over results, delaying foundation over facade. Do not be the rocky ground person. Go deep before you go wide. Build the root system before you celebrate the sprout. Now we come to the one that I believe is the most common cause of failure in the modern life, the thorny ground. The seed falls on good soil. It germinates well. It grows steadily. And then, gradually, almost imperceptibly, the thorns begin to close in, and they choke the life out of everything that was growing. What are the thorns? The parable names them clearly: the worries of life, the deceitfulness of wealth, the desires for other things. In plain language, distraction, anxiety, and divided attention. Here is what I have observed. Most people do not fail because they lack a good idea. They fail because they have too many good ideas and no discipline to choose between them. They start one thing, and before it has time to root, something else catches their attention, and they start that. And before long, they have a dozen half-started things and nothing finished. The thorns of distraction have choked every one of them. And then there are the worries. The constant low-grade anxiety about money, about what people think, about whether it is going to work out. Worry does not protect you from the future. Worry simply steals the energy you need to build it. It is a thorn that drains without producing. It takes everything and gives in nothing back. I want to be direct with you about something. Then the desire for many things at once is the enemy of the one thing that would change your life. I have seen people with genuine talent, genuine opportunity, genuine good soil, and they produced almost nothing because they could not stop wanting everything simultaneously. The farmer who tries to grow every crop at once grows nothing well. He spreads his water, his attention, his labor across too many rows, and every plant suffers for it. You pulling thorns is not a one-time event. It is a discipline. Every week, you must look at your life and ask what is growing here that should not be growing. What am I tolerating that is stealing nutrients from what matters most? What worries am I feeding that are taking energy away from my work? Pull them deliberately, consistently, not once, continuously, because thorns do not stop growing simply because you pulled them last season. They come back, and your job is to be more persistent than they are. If this message is speaking to something real in your life, if you can feel the thorns I am describing, make sure you are subscribed right here. Because this is exactly the kind of philosophy we return to every single week. And what I am about to share next, the law that separates the patient from everyone else, that one is going to hit differently. So what is good soil? What does it actually look like in a human life? I want to be precise here because I think the phrase good soil gets used loosely, as if it simply means a positive attitude or good intentions. It means far more than that. Good soil in agricultural terms has specific properties. It has the right pH. It has organic matter, the decomposed remains of what came before, which is to say, the lessons of past experience. It has drainage. It does not hold water so long that it drowns the roots. It has aeration, space for roots to breathe and expand. And it has microbial life, the invisible activity of organisms working below the surface that no one ever sees, but that makes everything above the surface possible. Now, translate that into a human life. Good soil in a human life has the right philosophy, the mental and moral framework through which you interpret experience. It has accumulated wisdom, the decomposed lessons of past mistakes turned into insight rather than bitterness. It has emotional drainage, the ability to process difficulty without drowning in it, to feel the rain without being destroyed by it. It has space, margin in your schedule, in your finances, in your relationships, room for new things to take root without being immediately crowded out. And it has invisible activity, the daily disciplines, the private habits, then are the small consistent actions that nobody sees, but that are the actual source of everything that eventually becomes visible. Here is what I want you to understand about good soil. It is not a gift. It is not something you are born with or denied. It is something you build deliberately over time. Through the choices you make about what you read, who you spend time with, how you respond to difficulty, and what you do with the lessons life hands you. The person with good soil has usually been through the rocky ground season. They have been through the thorny ground season. They have experienced the hard path. And instead of becoming bitter about those experiences, they composted them. They broke them down into wisdom. And that wisdom became part of the richness of their soil. So if you feel like your soil is not yet ready, if you feel like your life is still rocky, still thorny, still hard in places, do not despair. That is not a permanent condition. It is a current condition. And current conditions can be changed by the right effort applied consistently over time. The question is not whether you have good soil right now. The question is whether you are building it. Now I want to talk about something that most people in a hurry refuse to hear. Timing. There is a season for planting and a season for harvesting. And you cannot reverse the order. You cannot harvest in the spring what you planted in the fall. You cannot rush the growing season by wanting it more intensely. The calendar does not negotiate. The soil does not respond to urgency. The seed does not germinate faster because you are impatient. I have watched people plant at the wrong time and wonder why nothing grew. They started a business in the middle of personal chaos. When their relationships were broken, their finances were a wreck, their mind was scattered, and they could not understand why it failed. They tried to grow something in winter. Winter is not a punishment. Winter is a preparation. Winter is when the soil rests, when the nutrients replenish, when the ground hardens just enough to protect what is dormant beneath it. Winter is necessary. The farmer who resents winter is the farmer who does not understand farming. In your life, the winters are the seasons of loss, of difficulty, of waiting. The seasons when nothing seems to be happening, when you work and see no visible result, when you pray and plan and push and the ground stays frozen. Here is what I want you to know about winter. Something is happening. Beneath the surface, where you cannot see it, the preparation is underway. The roots are establishing. The soil is shifting. The conditions for spring are being created by the very cold that seems to be working against you. The law of timing requires one thing from you: patience that is active, not passive, not the patience of a man who sits and waits for something to happen, but the patience of a farmer who uses the winter to sharpen his tools, to repair his fences, to study the soil, to plan the spring planting. Active patience. Purposeful waiting. I want to ask you something directly. What season are you in right now? Be honest with yourself. If you are in winter, if things are hard, if the ground is frozen, if the results are not coming, do not panic. Do not abandon the field. Do not switch crops in desperation. Stay. You are more sharpen your tools. Prepare and trust that spring is coming, because it always does. 40 years observing human lives, I have never seen a winter that did not eventually give way to spring. Never. The question is never whether spring will come. The question is whether you will still be in the field when it does. Drop a comment below and tell me, what season are you in right now? I want to hear from you. And I want you to know you are not alone in the winter. Here is a law that will change the way you think about failure. The sower in the parable did not plant only in the good soil. He did not study the ground first, identify the best patch, and carefully deposit each seed in the optimal location. He went out and he scattered broadly, generously, without hesitation. Some fell on the path, some fell on rocky ground, some fell among thorns, and some fell on good soil. The sower knew this would happen, and he scattered anyway. This is the law of the sower. You must keep planting. You must keep going out. You must keep offering your best work, your best ideas, your best effort, even knowing that not all of it will take root, even knowing that some of it will fall on hard ground and be taken, even knowing that some of it will sprout and wither. You must scatter anyway, because here is the truth about the law of averages. If you sow enough seed, if you make enough calls, write enough letters, have enough conversations, show up enough times, the law of averages will work in your favor. Not every time, not even most times, but enough times, enough to produce a harvest. The person who plants only when they are certain of the outcome plants almost never. And the person who plants almost never harvests almost nothing. It is simple arithmetic. It is the law. I used to be afraid of planting in uncertain ground. I used to want guarantees before I would commit. And what I got for that caution was a life of very small harvests. It was only when I adopted the philosophy of the Sower. Scatter broadly, scatter generously, scatter without fear, that the harvest began to multiply. Standing here is what I want you to understand about rejection, about failure, about the seeds that fall on the path and get taken away. Those are not wasted seeds. Those are the cost of doing business with the universe. Every sower pays that cost. The great ones pay it without complaint and without hesitation. They simply reach back into the bag and scatter again. Do not let the seeds that fell on rocky ground stop you from scattering on the good soil that is waiting. The ratio of failure to success is part of the design. It is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. And the ones who understand that, the ones who can absorb the losses and keep planting, those are the ones who eventually stand in front of a harvest that astonishes even them. Now let me tell you about the law that makes all the others worth it. The law of the harvest. There are two parts to this law that most people only half understand. And it is the half they miss that costs them everything. The first part, you always reap more than you sow. One kernel of corn produces a stalk with multiple ears. One ear contains hundreds of kernels. The multiplication is built into the design. This is why the good soil in the parable produced 30, 60, 100 times what was planted. Not a little more, exponentially more. The harvest always exceeds the planting. This is why I have always said work harder on yourself than you do on your job, because the return on self-investment is compounding. Every book you read, every discipline you build, every skill you develop, it does not produce a linear return. It produces an exponential return. The knowledge compounds, the habits compound, the relationships compound. And one day you look up and the harvest is so much larger than the planting that you can barely trace the line back to where it began. But here is the second part, the part that breaks most people before they ever reach the harvest. You always reap later than you sow. Always. There is a gap. There is a waiting period between the planting and the harvest that is unavoidable, non-negotiable, and often agonizing. And most people quit during that gap. They plant. They wait. Nothing visible happens. They conclude that it is not working. And they stop 3 feet from the harvest. I have seen this so many times that it has become one of the great sorrows of my life. People who had done everything right, who had prepared the ground, planted the right seeds, watered faithfully, pulled the thorns, survived the winter, who quit in the final season before the harvest arrived. Ding ding, do not be that person. Do not let the gap between planting and harvest convince you that the harvest is not coming. It is coming. Then if you have followed the laws, if you have prepared the ground, planted the right seeds, maintained the disciplines, the harvest is not in question. Only the timing is. And the timing is not yours to control. It belongs to the soil. It belongs to the season. It belongs to a design older and wiser than any of us. Your job is simply to stay in the field. I want to tell you something about the mathematics of a life well planted. One good harvest, one season where everything aligns, where the soil is right, the timing is right, the seed is right, can repay years of difficult seasons, years of winters, Years of rocky ground and thorny patches and hard paths. I have seen this in business. I have seen it in relationships. I have seen it in personal growth. The person who persists through the difficult seasons, who keeps planting and preparing and maintaining their disciplines. And then one season, everything comes together, and the abundance of that one season changes everything. Not just financially, not just professionally, but in terms of who they are, in terms of the confidence they carry, then in terms of the evidence they now have that the laws work. This is why I say never judge a life by a single season. Never judge your progress by a single day, a single week, a single year. The farmer does not judge the farm by January. He judges it by the full cycle, by what the land produces over the course of seasons, years, decades. You are a long-term investment. Your life is a long-term project, and the returns are not distributed evenly across time. They come in waves. They come in seasons. And the wave that is coming, if you have been planting faithfully, may be larger than anything you have yet imagined. Here is what I want you to understand about multiplication. It requires a critical mass. There is a threshold below which nothing seems to be happening. The soil is being enriched. The roots are deepening. The network of underground connections is expanding. But above the surface, nothing is visible. And then something shifts. The critical mass is reached. And what was invisible becomes spectacularly visible. The Chinese bamboo tree grows underground for 4 years. 4 years of watering and feeding and tending a patch of ground that shows nothing. And then in the 5th year, it grows 90 feet in 6 weeks. Was it growing during those 4 years? Then, of course it was. It was building the root system that would support 90 feet of growth. The growth was always happening. It was simply happening where you could not see it. You may be in your bamboo years right now, tending ground that shows nothing, watering a patch that appears empty. Keep going. Keep watering. The multiplication is already underway. You simply cannot see it yet. Now I want to address the most important shift in thinking that this entire philosophy requires. Most people approach their lives as if they are responsible for the outcome. And when the outcome does not arrive on schedule, they conclude that something is wrong with the universe, with the system, with their luck, with themselves. But the farmer does not think this way. The farmer understands something profound about the relationship between effort and result. The farmer is responsible for the H conditions. The outcome belongs to the harvest. Let me say that again, because I want it to settle into you. You are responsible for the conditions. The outcome belongs to the harvest. What does this mean in practical terms? It means that your job, your complete and total job, is to prepare the ground, plant the right seeds, water consistently, pull the thorns, protect the young plants from frost, and maintain the disciplines that keep the soil rich. That is your jurisdiction. That is the domain of your responsibility. The timing of the harvest, not yours. The exact size of the harvest, not yours. Whether this particular seed produces 30 or 60 or 100-fold, not yours. You do not control those variables. You never did. And the sooner you release the illusion they do, the freer and more effective you will become. I have watched people destroy their peace and ultimately their productivity by trying to control the outcome, by checking and rechecking, by second guessing and abandoning, by losing faith every time the harvest did not arrive on the schedule they had set in their own mind. And in doing so, they neglected the conditions. They stopped watering because they were too busy worrying about the rain. They stopped pulling thorns because they were too busy calculating the harvest. The gardener's discipline is this: show up every day and tend the conditions, not anxiously, not frantically. Me with the quiet confidence of someone who understands the laws and trusts the process. This is one of the great distinctions between people who produce consistently over a lifetime and people who produce brilliantly for a season and then collapse. The consistent producers are not smarter. They are not more talented. They are simply more faithful to the conditions. They show up every day. They do the small things. They maintain the disciplines when no one is watching. And they trust with the confidence of a farmer who has seen enough seasons to know that the laws do not break. They trust that the harvest will come. Be a gardener. Then intend your conditions and let the harvest take care of itself. We have covered 7 laws. And now I want to give you something practical. Something you can use today, not next week, not when things settle down. Today, a life audit. 7 questions, 1 for each law. That will tell you more about why your seeds are or are not growing than any plan, any strategy, any course of action you have ever considered. Question 1, have I prepared the ground? Before I plant this next seed, this next goal, this next venture, this next relationship, have I done the invisible work? Have I broken up the hard thinking, removed the rocks of old habits, cleared the clutter of past disappointments? Or am I rushing to plant in unprepared ground because I am in a hurry? Question 2, is my environment rich soil or depleted soil? Look at the 5 people closest to you. Are they adding nutrients, encouragement, challenge, wisdom, accountability, or are they draining the life from everything you try to grow? And if the soil is poor, what are you willing to do about it? Question 3, where have I become hard? Where has the path formed in my life? The places where so many disappointments have walked that I have stopped being able to receive. Where am I no longer teachable? Then where have I closed off possibility because I have been hurt before? Question 4, how deep are my roots in the things that matter most to me? My work, my relationships, my character. Have I built depth or only surface? When the summer heat comes, and it will come, will I still be standing? Question 5, what thorns am I tolerating? What worries, what distractions, what divided attentions are quietly stealing the nutrients from what matters most? What am I feeding that I should be pulling? Question 6, what season am I in? And am I responding to it correctly? Am I trying to harvest in winter? Am I trying to plant in summer? Or have I aligned my effort with the actual season of my life? Question 7, am I tending the conditions faithfully? Or am I anxiously chasing the outcome? Am I doing the daily work, the small disciplines, the invisible maintenance? Or have I abandoned the conditions in favor of worrying about results I cannot control? These 7 questions are not comfortable. I know that. Honest self-examination rarely is. But here is what I know from a lifetime of working with these principles. The person who is willing to ask hard questions of themselves, who can sit in the discomfort of an honest audit and face what they find. That person is already ahead. Because most people will never ask. Most people will keep planting in the same poor soil, season after season, and wonder why the harvest never comes. You are not most people. I know that because you are still here, you have watched this far, you have stayed with these ideas, and that tells me something about the quality of your soil. So here is my challenge to you. Take these 7 questions, write them down, and answer them honestly. Not the answers that make you feel good, but the answers that are true. And then, based on what you find, decide what needs to be prepared, what needs to be pulled, what needs to be deepened before you plant your next seed. Because I promise you this, the harvest you are capable of, the life you are designed to live, is not a matter of working harder. It is a matter of working in the right conditions. And you have the power to create those conditions starting today. If you have made it this far, and you have, you are exactly the kind of person who takes this work seriously. Subscribe right here, because we bring this depth of philosophy every single week and share this with one person in your life who you know is planting in the wrong soil, not to criticize them as a gift. Because sometimes the most important thing one person can give another is a map to better ground. You have stayed with me through all 7 laws. And I want to acknowledge that, because it tells me something about you. It tells me that you are serious, that you are not looking for a shortcut, that you are willing to sit with the uncomfortable truth that the conditions of your life matter more than the intensity of your effort. That is not a small thing. That is the beginning of wisdom. The people who will do something with what they have heard today, who will actually sit down with those 7 questions and answer them honestly. Those people are rare. They are the good soil. They are the ones the harvest is waiting for. If you have found value in this message, if something in the last 30 minutes has shifted something in your thinking, you know what to do. Leave a like so the algorithm carries this message to someone else who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you never miss a week of this work. And more than anything, go and do something with what you have learned. Because information without application is just noise. You did not come here for noise. You came here perhaps looking for a harder method. What you found instead is a better question. Not how hard am I working, but in what soil. Dinden, thanks for being here. The end screen has more videos in the same world. Go deeper there. Pick whichever video on the end screen calls to you and keep building.